Hi, I am Destiny Gladys Chaiga from Uganda, a student at Uganda Christian University. My commitment to action is empowering pupils in rural schools of Moyo district with early childhood literacy skills through distribution of literacy materials. One thing that has kept me resilient and going forward is the hope for a better tomorrow.
Mahmoud here, back with another wellness exercise for you. This one is focused on visualization. And before I go into it, I want to remind you again to take some time. This time, you can choose to breathe, or instead, you can take some time to meditate. You can take some time to write gratitude notes to yourself. Do whatever you can for a second, just for your mind and your body to be able to get that rest that you might need. Again, make sure that you move somehow, stretch, move around, make sure you get that blood flowing, nourish your body if you can drink or eat. And if you can't, we're thinking of you. And take a moment to reflect. The quote I want to share with you now about visualization, one of my favorite quotes, and it goes, "And when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it." And it's by one of my favorite authors, Paulo Coelho, who wrote a great book called The Alchemist. And to me, this quote reminds me that whatever we put out in the universe, whatever we intend to do and we focus our energy on, can get done. It requires that start with gratitude, intentionality, and then action. And so for action now, I want you to close your eyes. Go ahead, do it. Don't keep them open. And think about the impact that you want to have in the world. Think about the specific person, the end person that you're trying to serve through your commitment. What do they look like? What are they currently doing? How would they feel after experiencing your service, your product, the offering that you're putting out in the world? How will it potentially impact and change their lives? After that, I also want you to take a moment to think about how your commitment is going to change your life, how it's currently caused different changes in your life. Working on these commitments provide us both with a lot of wellness benefits of having more meaning in our lives, but also having a greater impact on the world. So while you visualize and think about the next steps of your commitment, remember that you're making a big impact in the world and you're making a big impact in your own life. And that makes a difference. I'll see you again soon.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here to be talking about using social media for social good, how to craft inspirational messaging. Thank you so much to the Clinton Global Initiative University for allowing me to be here. Excited to talk about this topic. So in today's session, we're going to be going over a couple things. I always like to lay out at the beginning what we're going to be talking about. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Then we're going to dive into the social media landscape and what it looks like today. We'll talk about the bad versus the good of social media. We'll talk about using social media for advocacy, and then we'll talk about how you can also craft your own inspirational messaging using social media. So a little bit about me, first of all. So I'm Ghanaian American, and that means my parents are from Ghana, West Africa, but I was actually born in Canada and then raised here in the United States. And I call myself a third culture kid. And I feel like my whole background has kind of led me to the moment of being able to use social media, which is what I do right now, as well as being a medical student, in order to talk about different issues. So as a third culture kid, I was from all these different places, really learning how do I put my own story and my own background into the narratives and things that I do in my everyday life. When I was younger, I actually started a nonprofit organization called Hugs for Ghana. The purpose of Hugs for Ghana was to raise school supplies, medical supplies, and sports equipment from children in from children in my local community for children in Ghana, West Africa. I started that when I was in 7th grade, so years and years ago. I'm now in medical school, but it was an incredible opportunity for me to learn about how do you actually use social media to drive change. We used, at the time, we were just getting used to things like Facebook. MySpace was going out of the window. And so I learned how to actually use Facebook groups and create different forums and create areas where you can unite people from across the country. I then, after kind of going through middle school and high school, I led Hugs for Ghana, built it up into a large organization, and then went off to college at Yale University, where I served on student body and did a lot of different mentoring activities. After I graduated, I actually started a nonprofit, and that's how I really got involved in CGIU. I'm a CGIU alum through an organization called Hope in a Box. The purpose of Hope in a Box is to bring curriculum into schools that typically aren't there. So it specifically focuses on LGBT narratives and how can you get LGBTQ stories into libraries so that students have representation to see people that look like themselves. Once again, we used a lot of social media there in order to reach out to different teachers, to highlight different stories about what Hope in a Box was, and to highlight the stories of teachers and students that were finding our materials really useful. And we're actually, Hope in a Box is now in all 50 states, and we've put books, partnered with teachers in schools in every single state in the United States, which has been really awesome to see. And last but not least, and what I'm mostly here to talk to you about is now what I do as a medical student. I'm a full-time medical student at Washington State University, but I also am a social media medical educator. And I think that's a little bit of a twist on what people typically would call an influencer now. I've never liked the word influencer, but I think social media has become so much more that you can use it and you can build a following by actually educating other people and actually telling stories and actually using advocacy. So I've actually included my Instagram there, my TikTok. If you want to follow me, it's just my name, @JoelBrevel. And I'll be talking a little bit about how I do what I do and how you can also use social media for good. So I always like to start off by talking about the current social media landscape. Who are the big players? The two that I like to go to are Instagram and TikTok, but they're not even the biggest. Instagram has over 1 billion monthly active users. 67% of US adults are aged 18 to 29 on Instagram that use Instagram. 72% of teens use Instagram as well. And things like Instagram videos get 2 times as much engagement as photos, meaning that if you put out a video that's engaging for your audience or for just general people to understand, you'll get more engagement out of it, which can be a huge tool and an added bonus when trying to use social media to get messages out there. TikTok obviously is newer, but it's become kind of the darling of the social media world because it's AI driven. It has an immersive feed. And if you've never used TikTok, they have what's called a For You page, which you can kind of scroll through and it adjusts to put videos out that it thinks you might like. It has editing tools and visual effects that you can use within the app as well. 59% of the users there are between 16 to 24, and they now have over 1 billion monthly users. And obviously then you have your other apps as well. We have things like Facebook, which has actually 2.9 billion users right now, YouTube, which has 2.3 billion users, and then Twitter, which also has 330 million users. So lots of social media out there to choose from. And of course, while social media can be used for good, I think we have to start by talking about the bad of social media, because that's what we'll hear mostly about. And there are very valid concerns there. So some of the bad of social media include that it can quickly spread negativity just around in general, that fake news and propaganda can be divisive. And we've seen that a lot, even just most recently with the COVID pandemic, in terms of disinformation and misinformation being put out. We've seen it in election cycles in terms of disinformation once again and misinformation being put out. Disinformation being that it's purposeful information that's being put out there to mislead audiences. And misinformation being that just wrong things do get picked up a lot. Things like conspiracy theories can fester and grow over social media because they often get more engagement. And we hear a lot about how social media can impact self-esteem, confidence, and mental health. So you hear a lot about the influence of the world who may not necessarily look like how they do inside their Instagram posts, but can edit their images in order to make it look whatever they want it to look like and to set an unrealistic standard for students. So I think all of these are the bad of social media, and they're valid to talk about because they're things that social media can actually combat too, to be able to talk about these things and how they kind of come to exist, but also recognizing that they do happen. And so recognizing that these are things to avoid doing. But of course, there's the good of social media too. I think while it can spread negativity, it can also spread positivity and help change narratives, especially for communities who often haven't had opportunities to talk about issues that have been pertaining to them. And that's a lot of what I do right now. It also allows for groups to come together to foster acceptance and inclusion with other like-minded people. If you can't find a community around you in your immediate vicinity, the physical world, you can use the digital world to find other people who look like you, to find other people that think like you, or to network with other people just in general. You can have if you're a creator, you can use call to actions and put out accurate facts and figures. And you can bring awareness to issues that have traditionally not been brought up in mainstream media. And so you can really start to push different campaigns and call to actions to rally and get people to actually support a cause that maybe hasn't been as traditionally supported. And that's kind of how I use social media right now, for that advocacy, to talk about issues that don't exist currently in, specifically for me, the medical field. My Instagram and TikTok are all about busting medical myths, about changing the narratives, and by centering communities of color into the narratives of medicine and healthcare that often haven't been. So as I mentioned, I'm a third-year medical student right now. And about a year and a half ago, when COVID, well, about 2 years ago now, I guess, when COVID first came around, my school went entirely online. I was actually the first Black medical student at my school. Granted, it's relatively new. It's been around for only about 4 years now. I'm in the third class of students, but I was still shocked that I was the first Black student. And as I was going through my curriculum, I kept kind of looking around at the things that our curriculum had. And I noticed that Black skin or Black people weren't talked about often, or if we were, it was only in situations where it's related to infectious diseases or in relation to malnutrition and things like that. For example, in my dermatology class, I don't think I saw any images on skin of color for things like Lyme disease. Lyme disease is a bullseye rash. I'll talk about this a little bit later too. But if you aren't able to see how and diagnose how things look like, because skin conditions can look differently on lighter skin versus darker skin. If you don't know how to actually diagnose these things, they're going to get diagnosed later in Black populations. And studies actually show that Lyme disease in particular gets diagnosed later because both patients can't look up what a rash would look like on Lyme, and then also clinicians don't necessarily know what to look for either. So there was a whole host of things that were happening kind of 2 years ago when the COVID pandemic hit. There's me thinking about those types of things that existed. And there's also me thinking about things like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, these names that we've heard so much inside the media. And being a Black medical student, I wanted to do something where I could have a bigger impact on the world, not just talking in my local school and starting organizations, but wanting to actually have bring the things I was realizing in my own day-to-day life onto the national stage. What I ended up doing was starting a TikTok. And I created a video about racial disparities in medicine, and it kind of took off. So I'll show you some of the work that I'm doing right now and how I actually do it. But I think short form content is the future right now in terms of education, of talking about issues that people may not know about in short 30 to 60-second videos where you're able to really change people's minds and narratives by giving them access to information that they didn't have before. So really, that's how I came into using social media for advocacy. And it's been an incredible journey over the past few years. I now have over 500,000 combined followers across both Instagram and TikTok. And a lot of the people that follow me are literally there to just learn about new things in medicine that you may not have heard of before. So I have 2 example videos that I want to show of just what a video that looks like for me right now. And I will connect back to this later because there are elements of it that I want to talk about so that it can help you as well be able to create content if you want to use social media to amplify what you're already doing and use social media for good. So I'll play this first video and it's about a minute, so bear with it.
So I'm a second-year medical student right now, and my roommates and I were talking about times where we've witnessed biases in medicine so far in our medical education. My roommate reminded me of a time when he was in a suture clinic practicing his suturing skills on a banana. He asked the question of, how do you know what needle size to use, and how do you know what thread size to use? And the physician said it correlates with the thickness of the skin. So for example, the skin in your eyelid is much thinner than the skin in your lower back. But then they said that needle size can also correlate with a person's ethnicity, implying that different skin colors have different thicknesses of skin. which isn't true. And for me, the craziest part is when my roommate came home to tell me this story, my first instinct was to Google it and make sure it wasn't true and that I wasn't missing anything. That's literally how racism is perpetuated in the field of medicine.
So that was one storytime video I did. And here's another that I did about kind of learning about the things I was learning in medical education.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely insane how darker skin is often not shown as a pathology. They'll only use one standard color. Just to give one example of that, I'm a medical student right now. I remember in my first year, we were talking about cyanosis, which is when the skin goes blue. There's a ton of different reasons why it can happen. But I remember thinking to myself, well, my skin's not going to be blue if I'm cyanotic. So how do you look at it for Black patients? And then I had this like internal debate of if I ask the professor this question or do I look like that person that's just trying to talk about like skin color because I'm Black, you know? But I decided to ask the question. And the professor had a great response. He said, look at your nail beds, right? You can tell if it's cyanotic there. Look at your eyes. You can use mucous membranes, different parts of the body too. And afterwards, some of my classmates came up to me and said, wow, Joel, thanks for asking that question. We never would have even thought about that or thought about the different ways to think about it. I just kept thinking to myself, if I hadn't asked that question, would anyone have ever learned that?
So those were two videos that I created. And it's been kind of incredible to see how videos like that can go viral, can spark conversation. So that second video, the cyanosis and skin color, got over 200,000 likes and 500,000 views. And that's just one of the videos. I've made a lot of videos. So my impressions, which you can see on this slide here, I've made over 400 videos in the past a year and a half or so. Like I said, 500,000 followers, 11.8 million likes, over 50 million video impressions that other people have actually picked up a lot of my videos and posted them as well. And for me, is the most important thing, the 50,000 comments. And it's probably a lot more than that, but the comments are, I think, what makes videos like this so powerful. So some of the videos I've created have been about racial bias in medicine, talking about things like pulse oximeters and how pulse oximeters actually don't read equally on darker and lighter skin. I've talked about things like the VBAC calculator. VBAC stands for the vaginal birth after cesarean. So how likely is a woman able to have a vaginal birth instead of having to get a C-section surgery? And for a long time, there's actually an equation that was used to calculate that. And for some reason, one of the equation factors was race. And so if you're a Hispanic or an African-American woman, you were at much higher likelihoods of getting a C-section as opposed to getting a vaginal birth, being offered a vaginal birth by a doctor. I've created videos about the skin color problem I told you about. So where I literally just take two images and kind of point to them and say, here's what it looks like on lighter skin, here's what it looks like on darker skin. Created videos about lung function and race correction, about how things called spirometry actually still use race inside their equations, and how if you're an Asian patient or if you're a Black patient, you will be automatically assumed to have a lower lung functioning. And then the last types of videos I make are those storytime videos, where I talk about just things I've been noticing in my everyday life, as you've seen in that previous video. But like I said, it's the comments that I think have been the most important. And on this slide, you'll see some of the comments that people leave all the time on these type of videos. People saying, I've had people tell me that I don't feel pain because I'm Latina. It drives me insane. Someone saying, I've always thought that Black people's skin is thicker than that of white people, and Asian skin is thinner compared to a white person's skin. Someone said, wow, shows how necessary the expansion of medical literature and education is. Someone else saying, even in nursing school, they weren't shown skin conditions on dark skin. And other people saying that they've never even thought about this. So thanking me for preaching about it and talking about it. And that's why some people are starting to become a doctor. Then other messages also show kind of the impact of what it can have. One of my favorite ones at the top here is actually Jason Derulo, who commented on one of my videos saying that this is great. And I think that's the power of something specifically like of TikTok, of being able to get to an audience that may have never expected to even get this. I doubt Jason Derulo expected to be thinking about healthcare disparities and how they exist, but it came across his For You page. Other people have been inspired to actually talk back to their professors and say, hey, can I push back on that a little bit? I've seen on social media, someone that said this, is this accurate or is it not? Someone else talking about how even in their nursing school, they were saying things like that Black people express pain more dramatically, or that they might not be in as much pain as they're expressing. Other people said that because of my page specifically, that they made the decision to go to medical school in their early 30s, even with 2 children. Someone else talking about, even though they're white, that during their derm lectures, they always make sure to ask about what the conditions would look like on darker skin. And then my favorite message, I think, is this one on the right over here, which talks about how one of the videos I made, which was about the ABCDEs of melanoma, aka how can you actually find and diagnose melanoma, may have saved their life. That they had a mole that was on the bottom of their foot and had it removed earlier that year because they'd seen my video on it. So this is ways that social media can be used to educate specific populations that haven't had talks. In that melanoma video, I talked about a specific type of melanoma called acrolentiginous melanoma, which is known to be more common in Black populations and Asian populations, but just hasn't gotten as much attention in the media. And so a lot of people may not know to even get it checked out. So social media has a meaningful impact. For all the bads I talked about, if you're using it in the right way to educate, it can have a lot of good as well. And social media, like I mentioned, I use Instagram and TikTok specifically, but change makers are all over. This slide is about my friend Lashira Nolan. I always throw her in because she's absolutely amazing. She's the first recorded Black woman to be a student body president at Harvard Medical School. And about 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, in 2019, she posted a tweet that you can see here where she said, "Today we learned about Lyme disease and its classic symptom, a bullseye rash, erythema migrans, formed around the area of a tick bite. A classmate of mine asked, how is this diagnosed for those with darker skin? Our professor struggled to give him a clear answer." And then she kind of went down this pathway of talking about it. That was her way of using social media. And that specific tweet got over 16,000 likes, over 7,000 retweets. And especially on Twitter, there's a huge medical community on Twitter called MedTwitter. She went on then to write in one of the largest journals called the New England Journal of Medicine about her experience. And it led to a large shift, I think, in a lot of schools saying, how are we looking at actually the ways that we talk about skin color in our dermatology units? So I think it's another example of how you can use social media in order to kind of post about your own thoughts and have change come about and happen. And then taking it, especially in the medical field, into the research lens as well, connecting those two. But change makers aren't just in the medical field. I know I'm really focusing in medicine because that's what I'm based in. But so these are some of my favorite creators that are on the apps right now, so TikTok, on Instagram, on all the different places you probably use all the time, who are using social media to make change. Shirley Raines, for example, founded a nonprofit called Beauty to the Streets. What she does is she goes to the Skid Row area in Los Angeles and brings essential services and tries to bring beauty to the streets of Skid Row. So people that are homeless and often aren't thought about or houseless. And so she really does a lot to actually get these people to feel as if they're part of society again. And she'll actually live stream when she goes as well. And her followers are able to donate to her or get items that they think people would specifically like. Jesus Morales uses his TikTok to crowdfund money for street vendors. And in the span of 1 year, he was able to raise and distribute over $131,000 through donations. And how he does that is through crowdsourcing his followers. By going up to a street vendor and asking what they need, his followers will actually send him money, and then he's able to give that money to street vendors who really need it. And I encourage you to check out both their pages because they're absolutely incredible. And then there's also people like Zachary and Patrick Valentine, known as Zach and Pat on TikTok. And they strive to educate and entertain with their positive, comedic, and wholesome skits and dance videos. They're also amazing, and they're changing what kind of the narrative, what it looks like for someone to have Down syndrome. I think a lot of us don't know someone that has Down syndrome or has never met someone in that way. And so to see Zach and Pat be able to kind of break down the barriers and talk about the relationship as brothers and normalize Down syndrome as well, I think does wonders to get people to better understand about the condition and also understand and also destigmatize it overall. So these are all change makers from different fields, and they're all doing things in a similar way. I think the reason why they're so getting so much attention and so much and making so much change is because of one big thing that I want to talk about. I think that you can incorporate as well. So how can you craft inspirational messaging? And I think it comes through storytelling. That's the big thing. So what is the importance of storytelling? Stories elicit a lot greater empathy than facts or statistics can. They bring things to the real world. They make us understand why things are important. They can motivate those who hear them to take positive action. They lower an audience member's resistance to new ideas. When you tell a story, you get engaged in it. And as opposed to immediately saying, I don't believe that's true, you actually start to say, huh, this is an experience I haven't heard about. And you start to listen into it. And studies show that stories work. Studies have actually shown that people who hear a story are more engaged, are more likely to actually think about that story later on. And there's different types of storytelling too. There's transportation, which can be where an audience member is absorbed by the story. There's relatability, where an audience member may be able to see themselves in the story. And there's emotionality, where the audience members feel for and empathize with the storyteller. And depending on who your audience is, you can use one of these. In my own videos, I use a lot of transportation, relatability, and emotionality. Transportation, where I try and tell a story to get people to be in my shoes, as well as relatability, so that for people that maybe have seen things and be like, hey, I've been in that exact same situation. I'm glad someone's talking about it. Then emotionality, being able to have people empathize with me and explain why is this necessary? What are the changes that need to be made here? I also want to kind of leave you with some concrete ways that you can actually get your stories across and make them stick. I think we've all been in classes where we've had information, we've had teachers who just don't really, they're great teachers, but the things that they tell you don't necessarily stick in your mind. And I think what's most important for a story and what makes a powerful story is one that has stickiness, one that is able to stick in your mind long after. One of my favorite books that I ever read that I think has really shaped how I think about just like understanding and telling stories and how to make ideas stick, is called Made to Stick by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. It's all about why some ideas survive and others die. In the book, they use the acronym SUCCESS to talk about how everything you tell or every idea or concept you're trying to get across should have these specific elements. The S stands for simple. It's all about finding the essence of the idea, knowing what you're advocating for. The U is unexpected. To get someone's attention, do the unexpected. What do people not know? The C is concrete. You want to paint a mental picture of what's actually happening in that moment. The other C is credible. It's about using outside experts or anti-authorities, or using yourself as the authority if you are the authority figure. E is emotional. People care about people, not necessarily the numbers. And you can use both. You can use the numbers, but then use people to substantiate the numbers. And the last, and I think the most important one, is the S, stories. So wrapping it all together in a story, so it makes sense. So if we were to look at these 6 different kind of elements of telling anything that you want to make stick, if you think back to the video I just showed you, you'll probably see each of these inside the elements of the video I gave. So simple, talking about my experience of having my roommate come home and tell me a story about how the professor told him this thing. It's unexpected because some people may believe it, right? And so when you start seeing that, you start thinking, isn't this true? And then the unexpected part is like, it's actually not true. And also, how crazy is it that I had to Google it as a medical student to make sure it's not true? The concrete, making sure that you have a specific mental picture. So talking about how my roommate came in, he was suturing on a banana. All those things are imagery that's gonna get you thinking about it. Credible, it's a story. And I actually used an anti-authority in this where I had a physician who should know better, but necessarily didn't know better. So pushing back on that authority figure. E as the emotional, why does it matter? Using the people and then using myself as this is how I felt when my roommate told me this. I think that creates the emotion of it. Then the whole thing was a story as I went through that. So as you can see, using each of these elements can help you elevate your story to bring people in. And then beyond that, there's 8 characteristics of all good storytelling that, in addition to those 6 things, I think you want to make sure you have. The first is you want to make sure that you have an inciting incident. So talking about what was the moment that changed you. And if you don't have a moment, you can pick just one specific thing and highlight it, but you really want to focus it in on a specific moment. Next, you want to introduce specific characters. Names do enrich a story, so you can include specific names as well. I didn't include a specific name, but I did say my roommate, so that created a type of persona that you could then latch onto. If there's a specific setting, you want to say that too. Where are you right now exactly? Were you sitting in the back of the theater at the age of 12 when your life was changed? For me, I was at home when my roommate came over to me. You wanted to answer the question, what was happening? So what was the exact moment in time? Was it at 3:06? Was it at 10 minutes past midnight? Was it when you were in class? Was it right before the bell rang? Any of those things help put the moment in time in context for your listeners. You want to introduce some type of challenge in your life, saying what the problem is, and then what is keeping you from achieving that your goal to the problem. Something always seems to be at stake for number 6. What happens if you don't achieve the goal? If there's nothing at stake, then why should anyone care? And you really want to always make sure you're talking about what's at stake. What was the lesson learned? You want to offer your experiences to other people, and the lesson is the point of the story. So what's the payoff for the listener? You want that last line or two to be something that's like, wow, I've either learned something new, or I'm going to take this away with me, or that last time that I think is the most important, because it's the last thing that people are going to remember. And it indicates, are they going to listen to that story again? Are they going to share it with someone? Are they going to comment on it? What is a lesson that they are learning? And then similar to that, number 8, make sure you reach the bigger idea. Your story should be bigger than you. Don't make it a selfish story just about yourself, but make sure you connect it into the larger discourse of the world that's going on, and the things that you're trying to kind of communicate about why the work you're doing is important. And of course, tell the truth as you remember it, because authenticity is key. And so I think with these 8 characteristics of good storytelling, then the acronym of success as well, you can translate these things into social media. And you don't always have to even use talking points. You can use captions, or you can use imagery in order to tell these stories. But I think by using both of these, you can begin to build an audience and begin to storytelling in a way that engages and captures people's imaginations, specifically about topics that they may not have heard about before. It's been incredible, once again, like I said, seeing the impact that storytelling via social media can have, and how social media can be used for good. How you can bring about conversations that haven't been had before on the internet, and really get them to foster and change minds and change opinions. So hopefully in all of this, you've learned something new, or that you have some specific takeaways. And I want to say thank you again to CGIU for allowing me to come back. It's always amazing to be back as alumni. It's an incredible organization. So in these next few sessions, make sure that you really take in everything, learn as much as you can, and hopefully I'll see you posting and tweeting out there on TikTok, on Instagram, on wherever you are, about some of the things you're learning, and I'll see your content soon. Take care, everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Mahmoud Ketter, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Floramind, a company I started while I was in college to address the youth mental health crisis. And at that time, I initially started Floramind as a commitment through the CGIU program in 2018, where I got to attend at the University of Chicago. Attending the meetup and being part of the program was a life-changing experience for me. I got incredible introductions to mentors, potential people to partner with, and insights from colleagues who were working on doing this type of work across the world. This community means so much to me because it's where I feel like I can be myself the most. Feeling like I want to change the world, and the same feelings that you have about changing your world and changing a community can feel isolating sometimes, especially as a founder, especially as a commitment maker. And I think this was the biggest highlight for me, being part of CGIU, the community, the people you get to meet, the insights you get to gain. And today you have an incredible opportunity to join office hours, where you're going to get mentorship and expertise from topic experts in the organizations and focuses that you have. And I hope you take full advantage of it. I felt so lucky to have that type of mentorship from CGIU topic mentors and experts that guided me in understanding where I need to go next, how to make a bigger impact, how to refine my vision. And these are the type of things that you're going to get by joining. I hope you take full advantage of it, and best of luck.